grade. It's Mrs. Guasto. I'm going to go over your history lesson with you for this week. So let's get started. So I'm going to be reading from the card, number 26, your history card, Rome Burns, Nero Persecutes Christians. And this happened in 64 AD. So Nero was 16 when he began to rule Rome. Up until this time, Christianity was tolerated along with the worship of pagan gods. However, Christians were beginning to be seen as a threat to the Roman Empire and as poor citizens because they would not worship anyone but their one and true God. Nero instituted the first full-scale persecution of Christians in 64 AD. In 64 AD, a fire destroyed Rome. First, it was said that Nero started the fires. Then, Christians were accused of having started the fires. This accusation led to widespread execution of the Christians. Nero was one of the worst persecutors of Christians in all of history. He provided evening entertainment by soaking Christians in tar, tying them to poles in his garden, and lighting them on fire. He also threw them to wild beasts. It is possible that during this time, the apostles Peter and Paul were executed. Nero began to rebuild Rome. His troops eventually rebelled against him, and he took his own life. I'm also going to read a little bit from ancient Rome about the persecution of Christians. So, the Great Roman Peace. So this is out of this book that we've been reading at school. And I'm going to talk about a boy named Luciano, and it's just a boy in the book who is studying Rome. So, the next day, Luciano told the class, the early Christians were people who followed the teachings of Jesus. They believed in one God. They also believed it was most important to live in God's kingdom after they died. The Romans did not like the idea of any kingdom being more important than Rome. The Christians respected the government and paid their taxes, but many Romans thought the Christians were dangerous to Rome. The Romans were always afraid of angering the gods. They wanted everyone in the empire to worship their own gods and the Roman gods too. This way, the Romans thought no gods would get angry and punish the Romans. The Romans thought the Christians were reckless. The Christians worshipped only one God. They would not worship other gods. The Romans thought the Christians were taking a chance of angering the other gods and getting the whole human race in trouble. The teacher smiled brightly and said, "Thank you, Luciano. You have done a fine job today." The teacher turned to the class and said, "The Romans persecuted the Christians because of their religious beliefs. Whenever something bad happened in Rome, the Romans blamed the Christians. For example, there was a terrible fire in AD 64. Large areas of Rome were destroyed. The Emperor Nero blamed the Christians, but Nero was a very selfish man. According to an old story, he cared so little about Rome that he strummed the strings of a musical instrument called a lyre while the city burned. Today we have the expression fiddling while Rome burns. It means paying no attention to great disasters taking place around you. At times the Christians were treated as criminals. They were put in prison or killed for not worshiping the Roman gods. Sometimes Christians were made to face wild animals in the Colosseum. The Romans persecuted the Christians for many years. But the number of Christians continued to grow, even though it was dangerous to be a Christian. This is because the Christians welcomed poor people and slaves. The Christians promised a better life in the next world for those who suffered in the Roman world. And just to define the word persecute for those of you who may not know what it means, persecute means to treat people cruelly and unfairly, which is what Nero did during his reign. Thank you, third graders, and I hope you learned a lot about Nero and his reign and his persecution of Christians. I'll see you next time. Bye.